Today, we discuss stock up and stock down players from this exciting week 4 of fantasy football. We talk how much we're paying for them, how much we're looking to sell for them, and whether we view this as a buy or sell window for all these players. Stick around for all that and more. And welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Justin, joined as always by David and JP. We're stoked. It's been a fun week of football. I don't know about you two. My teams are doing pretty well. David, how you doing this week?
It's my worst week so far, but not horrible, I guess.
That makes my week even better. JP, how are you?
Outside of the Rushy Rice part, pretty good.
Yeah, that's a harrowing transition there. Hate to see it. Hate to see some of these injuries. And that is in fact our next section. David, give us the skinny on who all unfortunately got hurt or who we got clarification on their injuries.
Yeah, well, like JP said, the Reishi Rice one's the biggest one. He's feared to have a torn ACL, but it sounds like we won't know for at least a few days. Typically, that's a pretty quick test, so I'm a little confused by that, but maybe it's good news. That's all we can hope for right now. Christian Watson, ankle injury, I think a high ankle sprain, out at least a week or so, probably going to be a little bit longer. Jonathan Taylor, high ankle sprain, but he could be ready for this week because he's just not human, I guess. Anthony Richardson's hip injury sounds like he's probably going to play this week, but he might miss, so pretty important to monitor there for several reasons. Not a new injury, but just some new information on CMC. Sounds like maybe early to mid-November is what we could target for his return. Just hard to count on anything, though, for him this season. Definitely a tough break.
And thank you, David. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into the biggest injury there, Rashi Rice. How are we handling that situation, JP?
I'm just going off the assumption now that it is an injury that's going to take him out for the year. But I mean, from what we saw, Rushy Rice, he's a second-year player playing alongside Mahomes, and he was putting up elite numbers. He's the clear go-to guy for this Chiefs offense, especially for next year with Travis Kelce. We've already seen it, what looks to be a decline. He's a super valuable asset, but obviously he's not going to help you win this year. So I might look to move him if I can get a top 15 dynasty wide receiver, ideally top 12 one on a competing team, because if you're competing, it's really hard after he's taken out of your lineup. But on a rebuilder, honestly, I think he's one of the best targets that you could possibly have, for that kind of a build.
I agree. Personally, I just was able to move Jalen Waddle, who pretty down on these days, for Rice. Love that type of move. Definitely agree he's a target. David, we also have that Christian Watson injury. You are our resident Packers aficionado expert. What are the implications, in your opinion, here for fantasy?
Well, I guess we'll start with Watson himself. It's just another tough break for him. He seems to always be injured. This one's not a hamstring injury. It was just the result of a bad tackle. Football, it happens. Just kind of sad for him, though, because it just seems to be a trend, even though this one was, kind of unavoidable. As long as he's out, though, it seems like Wicks is going to be taking on a lot of the role that he was playing, probably all of it. I forget exactly how many targets he had.
13.
That's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to be wrong. I think he's also tied for the lead in targets on the season, believe it or not. Wick's probably startable while Watson is out. Maybe he actually takes that role by the horns while Watson is out, but don't expect much change for Reed or Dobbs. So pretty much all Wick's up from that injury.
I think he's a fringe wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 play with obvious upside. And with the target share he has, just needs to come down with those touchdown passes. You were saying you think he dropped 2 in the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, one might not have been a touchdown, and they might not have been drops in the book, but he should have caught both of them, and they both would have been touchdowns.
Would have been nice to see as a Packers fan, I'm sure. And we got 2 injuries now on the Colts. So JP, JT, and A Rich may or may not be missing time. How much are you reading into both of these?
Now, the Anthony Richardson one, it looks like he's probably going to play this week, but they're going to evaluate him throughout the week. But it looked like a hip injury that they are saying that it looks better than what they expected. But Jonathan Taylor with a high ankle sprain, that's pretty concerning. But the reporting was that it was pretty mild. Jonathan Taylor, he seems like he kind of has that Wolverine blood, so maybe he will play. But I'd probably think that he does miss a week. But yeah, that's definitely something to monitor.
Yeah, check your waivers for Trey Sermon just in case. Hopefully you were already rostering him if you've been following along with us. We love that any RB on a 53 type of strategy. We obviously pay some homage to Scott Connor for really giving us a little bit more on that. And then on the CMC injury, I don't really think much changes. We kind of expected Mason to be the guy for several more weeks. So any real change in perspective, David, or pretty much about where we were before on Mason?
Yeah, I don't think this changes much. It kind of gives us a target date, but I mean, it's like what 6, 7, 8 weeks away potentially. So that's kind of hard to even trust. This has been a weird injury, so I'm just gonna take the news as it comes. I'm holding CMC where I have him, and I'm playing Mason where I have him.
Absolutely. Moving on to our stock down, stock up players. We're going to start positive because we're a positive type of podcast here. Go ahead and start me with your first stock up guy, JP.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. here. And coming into the season, this is a player who was getting a lot of steam about how good he looked in camp. And then he opened the season through the first 2 weeks. He had 6 catches between those 2 weeks, which, is pretty solid. But with the way that BTJ plays and how special he is down the field, he had turned those 6 catches into 141 yards and a touchdown. So he's looked pretty solid those first 2 weeks. But now in weeks 3 and 4, in back-to-back weeks, he's had 9 targets. This is not a player that really needs a high target volume to produce, but he seems like he's gaining the trust of Trevor Lawrence. He's continuing to develop and he's earning those targets. So that is a really good sign for a guy who is a first round draft pick. He's an athletic freak. And also, he's shown now that he is a great player in the NFL, and he's wide receiver 14 on the year in fantasy points. Wide receiver 14 for a 21-year-old guy. So I think that the arrow is really pointing up for this player. And we talked about in the offseason that Brian Thomas Jr., he started playing football later on than most people that have played in the NFL. So I just would say watch out for this guy who looks to get better and better every single week. And being a top 15 guy already is really, really encouraging.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. I tried to buy for a random first in a couple places recently. Going to start the line at a first and a second. Random first and a second. Are you paying that, JP?
I think that's probably what you would have to pay. I'm not sure that I would pay that, but if I had the extra second, I think I might consider it, especially if I had Rushy Rice or something and I needed to plug in a guy to help me compete.
If you have to add an extra third, any chance, or is that first and second pretty much your max point of pain?
I think that'd be what would be my max. Would you consider that first and second if you really need a receiver?
Absolutely. I could see considering that. Just need the extra picks like we always caveat.
All right, Justin, who is your first stock up player?
My first stock up player, my hot take. QB1 overall in fantasy from our hot takes episode this summer that Jaden Daniels would be the QB1 overall. I didn't really believe he'd be the QB1, but I did believe that it was a pretty sure thing he'd be a QB1. He certainly looks like a definite QB1 with the QB1 overall potential. So just a little bit. So far this season, 82% completion percentage, 897 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception only. This is a guy we expected to do the majority of his work on the ground, and he has been a very solid passer. Obviously, the touchdown numbers are not prolific, but the yardage and touchdowns through the air, coupled with the fact that he's averaging 50 rush yards and a touchdown on the ground, this is something that we absolutely love for fantasy. And he has been good for NFL football, which is the crazy part that I personally didn't expect. I just expected him to be good for fantasy. He's making a case for QB1 overall in Dynasty, and it's currently QB2 on Keep Trade Cut. I absolutely love it. I'm not sure that it's a problem to buy at his current prices. I'm not really sure.
I think before we nail in that price, I just want to mention this stat that I heard, and I haven't checked it, but I assume it's right because I'm gullible. I heard that he has led more point scoring drives than he has thrown incompletions so far this season. That's crazy. Good for him, man. I'm definitely getting some FOMO there. I ended up getting 0 shares in the offseason, just didn't have the opportunity, not because I was out on him or anything. Let's go ahead and get to the price here. Kind of like we start with a lot of elite quarterbacks or quarterbacks pushing into that tier 1 or trying to pay 3 random firsts.
Of course.
What if 2 of them are non-playoff?
Probably. I'm going to vet those. Like if they're looking like it's the 101, 102, maybe not. Still, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's say one is like really early. One is like looks like it's the 105. One looks like it's a random first that could go either way. I think I'm probably paying that if it doesn't like make it so my timeline to compete is pushed back a year. Like if I have them to spend, if I'm choosing between Jaden Daniels and trying to get another tier 1 quarterback, but that's what those firsts are, I'm absolutely paying those early firsts for him, but not if it handcuffs my team for another 2 years.
And let's just say you've got a bunch of capital, you did a productive struggle or something, 4 firsts spread out over 2 years, and you've got a couple in your pocket still.
I think I need to try to get something back like a startable piece, something that I like in the neighborhood range of a second. But I don't know. It's hard. Like I don't think I should. And if it's a start 11, no, probably not. But like in a start 9, start 10, like I think that's the type of this guy looks really good. Like he's gonna break fantasy like Lamar Jackson, but he's younger, and we're gonna have years of this. Like I think that's a really hard price, but I think I'm probably considering it in some places.
And thanks for mentioning the starters. Also, want to say this all 12-team leagues, not 10-team, because the price definitely changes for 10-teamers.
Yeah, it's a tough one, David. Why don't you go ahead, give us your stock up guy? Hopefully JP can stump you as much as you tried to stump me there.
Yeah, first guy I'm going to go with here, Jaden Reed. We spent a lot of the summer trying to figure out who the relevant pass catchers in Green Bay were going to be. And it was a high-powered offense with a young quarterback. You just wanted to take some bets. It sure seems like Reed is the best fantasy asset on their team as far as pass catchers go. The other guys still have some upside, but boy, Reed is that dude. Wide receiver 4 on the season in PPR. And that includes a 2-target game in Malik Willis's first start. In the 2 games that Love has played, he's averaging 30.1 PPR points per game. It's a 2-game sample size, don't get me wrong, but whew, that is crazy. Tied for 3rd in yards per out run with Justin Jefferson with a minimum of 12 targets. It looks like he's for real when you see him on the field. The data backs it up. He's locked and loaded top guy there in Green Bay for me for a few years.
Now, would you pay a first and a second for Jaden Reed?
If I vetted the first and I had the picks, yeah, as long as I didn't think it would be an early first, I would probably do that. I'd rather find a way to like pay a first and a guy like AD Mitchell or something if I could, try to keep the flexibility of the pick. Yeah, I don't think a random first is getting it done right now in most cases.
Would you pay Michael Pittman and 2 seconds?
I think that might be bad process, but because of how I feel about the 2 players, I think I would, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. The guy has looked incredible, and Jordan Love, Justin, I think he's great. You not as much, but yeah, no, if I can get the number 1 receiver, I don't mind that at all. He's looked fantastic.
Let me interject. We don't usually ask a question like this, but BTJ or Jaden Reed, David?
I think, especially if I'm competing, I got to go Reed. If my timeline's a year or 2 away, I would consider it. Honestly, hate doing 1-for-1s within a position, especially if it's 2 young guys or 2 old guys. So if I'm getting a plus to go one direction, I'll probably go that direction. If not, I'll just stick with where I'm at.
Just wanted to get you back. Make sure we ask you some tough questions too. JP, who's your next guy here that you have as a stock up guy?
I mean, who else but Nico Collins, baby? That's right. Nico Collins is leading the NFL in receiving yards by over 100 yards, and he's on pace for 2,000 receiving yards. When everyone thought his target share would come down with the addition of Stephon Diggs, which, that's a reasonable expectation, nope. Nico Collins, he continues to soar. Nico Collins, I've seen from multiple people now, is listed as today's redraft wide receiver 1 rest of season. And I think he's at least got to be top 3. And he's just 25 years old right now. He just got an extension before the season, and he's attached now to CJ Stroud, one of the best young passers in the whole league, for at least the next few seasons. But he's getting the golden combination right now. He's getting downfield targets, he's getting high volume, and he's getting high quality passes as well because he has CJ Stroud. Now, this is the kind of stuff that we've seen from elite guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and he could certainly finish the season as wide receiver 1. And I mentioned in the offseason, I just think he has every tool that you want in a superstar wide receiver. He's a great route runner. He gets open. He makes contested catches, and he's really, really tough after the catch as well. So if I have Nico Collins, I'd be very excited. And I think he's definitely a top 8 dynasty wide receiver.
Given the age, the projection, I'm going to start the line here at 2 firsts and a second to purchase him.
And a second. I think that's probably about his price, and I think I would be willing to pay that because I think if you're getting top 3 production from a young guy, I would do that.
Are you willing to pay 3 firsts if you have them, if you know that none of them are a guaranteed missing the playoffs first? So fringe to late, but no early firsts.
I might consider that. I mean, I might try to go to the tier above first because I think I would prefer CeeDee Lamb still, and if I can get CeeDee Lamb, I would rather do that. But if nobody's budging, I might pay that, but I'd probably be looking to get a third back to do that.
Yeah, he has gone up in price. I have regrets about selling my only share over the offseason. But what can you do? He is a stud, and yeah, he's approaching that elite tier. David did point out in the chat, our group chat earlier, the one difference between him and the guys that are no doubt worth 3 firsts is just Collins is a little bit older than all those other guys, the JJs, Chase, Amon-Ra, Neighbors, Harrison types of players, but he looks good.
He is still 25, too. It's not like he's ancient. He's just I see him more as like kind of like how we viewed AJB over the last like year or two, basically. Stud guy in his prime, but not quite as long of a shelf life as guys like Neighbors or Marv, especially.
I think that's a really good comparison.
All right, Justin, who's your second stock up player you got?
I don't really play by the rules, so I'm going to throw out two players here because the people need to know how much I'm into these Commanders. So first, going to start with Terry McLaurin. So obviously, he's a little bit older. He's 29. I was also hoping to be able to talk about Luke McCaffrey, but he hasn't been doing it for us. Terry is the guy here. He is developing chemistry with Jaden Daniels, who is figuring out on the NFL level what to do. 20 points and 18.2 PPR points in the last 2 weeks for Terry. He is developing some deep play chemistry. Had a nice, almost like 50-yard bomb, went up just short of the end zone on that, but did get a touchdown later in the game. Touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. I think he's a really interesting wide receiver 1, 2, like, wide receiver 14 with upside to be a wide receiver 1 any given week type of player. I think he's the type of guy that's going to be one of those like back end warp type of difference makers, one of the last guys that's really useful in rostering. He has that potential. And I think the price is still not really adjusted that high yet because he had a couple weak games to start the season. So I'm very interested in prying to buy.
All right, let's talk about that price. I think
Don't ask it.
realistically,
Don't
you
ask
can
it.
probably start by sending a second, but I don't think that's going to get it done. You're going to do 2 seconds if you have to?
Sure, yeah. Just don't ask me about the first. I don't want to answer that.
I'm going to have to, and you know it. You do a 1-2 swap, you send a first for him in a second.
If I feel confident about the first being a playoff first, I think I'm considering it, especially on a team where I have like a Jaden Daniels, so I can stack him for that like upside. I'd consider a 1-2 swap.
I feel like we've probably reached the line there. Is that
I can't
accurate?
do any more for a 29-year-old wide
Yeah.
receiver who's never been a wide receiver 1 in fantasy now. But I do think he's got a lot of upside.
I agree with that, especially for this year. You want to go ahead and do your little bonus stock up guy here?
Brian Robinson, our other guy, running back here for the Commanders, he has had a solid start of the season. This is an offense that's going to score a lot of touchdowns. Austin Eckler's not getting any younger. I know he has had some concussion issue, I believe it was. So we got to see a little more Brian Robinson than we might otherwise, but either way, I am so interested in this guy. The same price that I just said for Terry McLaurin, a 1-2 swap, 2 seconds. I'm willing to pay that for Brian Robinson. Not willing to give up just a first for him, though, because I think I can aim a little bit higher. But this is again, same thing, except not wide receiver. RB, that's RB 14-ish, in my opinion, with RB1 upside on the week is kind of like a pretty fair expectation for this guy. So I'm all in on this offense. I was listening to Rich Eisen's show. He said he's a little hot takey at times, of course, but he said, I wouldn't be surprised to see this team make the playoffs. They could win the division. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibilities, and it's crazy.
So just one question on that. You need a flex play, Brian Robinson or Terry McLaurin?
Brian Robinson for me just from the floor. And I think the ceiling's not that incomparable because B-Rob could easily have 2 touchdowns in a game. And go ahead and give me your next and our last stock up guy, David.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Xavier Legette here, and this one's going to be quick. Did you guys see that touchdown celebration after his first touchdown? Hopped on the horse, rode it around. Looked like a natural, and I assume that's because he is. Pretty perfect celebration for him, in my opinion. If you've never heard him talk, go listen and you'll understand. So I guess my only question is, how can a first-round pick who already has his trademark touchdown celebration fail? No, I'm just kidding. I got a little more substance there. I promise.
No, that's good. That's enough.
That's perfect. I'm definitely still leaning on my evaluation of him as a prospect a little bit, but the way that offense looked to start, I was wondering if maybe he was a dead asset already. It looked like he might not ever get a chance. Now we got Dalton at QB, new life in that offense. Thielen on IR, unfortunately for Thielen, but it is giving Legette a chance. It looks like Mingo seems to have transitioned to the slot in place of Thielen, but his usage is about the same, whereas Legette saw 10 targets last week. So it seems like his role in the offense is growing. I think if he can establish himself as the wide receiver 2 there before Thielen gets back, then his role should be maintained. I think Mingo would go to the bench in that case. I'm not sure how high I'd go here, but I'd definitely be willing to pay that 25 second that it would have taken to get him over the summer.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the price point here because I've actually bought some from JP. I paid a 26 second and third for Legette over the offseason. Are you paying a 25 second and third, David?
If they were at least potential playoff picks and I had both a need and a little more flexibility after the trade, yeah, I think so.
2 playoff seconds.
I don't think I can get to 2 seconds quite yet. one more week and you might have me.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, JP. Just because I bought him for that, I just wanted to validate my purchase price.
I mean,
It was a
fair
little
enough.
rude, but
I needed validation. Okay, I was feeling really, really bad about that purchase until this week. Okay,
That's funny.
JP, who is your first stock down guy?
I'm going to talk about Rashad White here, and he was keep trade cut RB 15 heading into the season. He's since dropped to RB 29, and why is that? Well, he's only averaging 9.7 fantasy points per game and an abysmal, I mean, awful 2.8 yards per carry. He does not look that great. Meanwhile, his teammate Bucky Irving, he's averaging 5.8 yards per carry. He's twice as efficient. So Todd Bowles, throughout the beginning of the season, weeks 1, 2, and 3, he said Rashad White, he's our guy. He's our workhorse. But then he finally admitted before week 4, he said, okay, Bucky Irving, he has earned more touches. That came to fruition because Bucky Irving, he saw a season high of 42% of snaps, and you saw him get some goal line work. And Rashad White, I mean, he still has that receiving work and it gives him some sort of floor. That is, unless Bucky takes that as well. But he doesn't really appear to have that same ceiling that he had last year. And the reason he was so good last year and was just a surprise for, the price that you had to get him for, it was because he got all of the work. He got all of it. And it's because he didn't have a competent RB2 in the backfield with him, but now he does. And he's not giving you explosive plays. So I just don't think that there's a whole lot of upside to him now. He's okay. He's startable, but he's not somebody that you're excited about starting like you were in the beginning of the season.
Now, before I ask you anything about prices, is this at all a buy low opportunity for you, or are you looking to just sell before the bottom falls out?
I mean, I do think that the 2.8 yards per carry is bound to come up a little bit. And he, like I said, he still does have that receiving floor. So it depends how low. I might be willing to pay a second, but I also might be willing to sell for a second potentially. It is a little bit sketchy.
I'm not even sure you can get a second for him right now. I'm going to be honest. People are worried. If all you could get for him was 2/3, say you're a team that you've decided you have to start tearing it down, would you take the 2/3 if you started out 0-4 on a team where you were hoping you might be competing?
Probably not, just because I think that how good he is as a receiver will keep a role for him in the NFL. And I think just with that, he'll always be startable for the next, few seasons.
All right, fair enough. So somewhere between a second and 2/3, kind of hammering in on a sort of a price point. He's one I'm very worried about the bottom following out.
All right, Justin, who is your stock down player?
My first stock down guy, well, this is the Pitts to have to talk about this, but it's Kyle Pitts, guys. So a goose on Sunday. This guy is not a lineup lock, and I hoped he would be in a few leagues. He had a touchdown week 1 and a 50-yard bomb in week 3. If he didn't have those two buoying his production, he wouldn't even be worth talking about. Like, and he's just I don't really know what to do with him. I'm taking him out of my lineup. I have 3 shares and I'm not starting him anywhere next week. I'm starting Tucker Kraft over him. Actually, I have one league where I have Mark Andrews and I have Pitts, and I'm honestly considering starting Zach Ertz off my bench. I don't even know. Like, this is bad. I don't really know what to do. I read like a little post on Reddit about, comparing his arc to Njoku and Ingram being, round 1 athletic tight ends, who had some early production and then struggled for a while. And yeah, of course it could happen. But even though Dynasty is a long-term game, it's also about winning and accruing value. And I don't know. I'm really torn what to do. I kind of need your guys' help putting this together, to be honest with you. I have someone trying to buy him off of me in one league where I have him, and I don't know if I don't really know what to do. So, David, I suppose you should ask me some smart questions to see if you can help me figure this out.
this is a tough one, man, because the upside exists. He's still younger. You can still kind of sell yourself on some hopium. Man, like you said, he's just not done anything, and you're not even like you're talking about starting Zach Ertz over him. I mean, are you trying to get out? Are you trying to buy low? Like, I don't think a second buys him quite. Would we agree with that?
Think I'm willing to buy him for under a first. If I could get a first for this guy, he is gone in a
Oh, totally.
like so fast.
Absolutely. Would you pay a second in Goddard? Not competing.
Yeah, if I'm not competing at all, but if I'm competing, I'm taking Goddard in a second in a heartbeat.
Fair enough. I think that's important there. Just cash price, 2 seconds.
I gotta vet the seconds. If they're both gonna miss the playoffs, I'm probably taking the seconds. But if they're both kind of random or one playoff, one probably misses, I think I'll pay that for Pitts. But another week like this, and I might not. It's hard. It's ugly. It's hard in them streets.
Yeah,
That's
that's fair.
sad.
All right, David. I'm too depressed. Can you move us on to something else depressing?
Go with my second player first here. It was Mark Andrews, the other tight end who's even worse than Pitts somehow. Like, I don't even know what to say, really.
Sorry, you meant sixth offensive lineman. You told me he was an offensive lineman last night when I asked you who he was.
You know how they're using him? That's basically it.
Right.
Back-to-back games with 1 target and 0 points. Just 12.5 PPR points on the whole season at this point. I like even if they were to have a game script where they want to use the tight end, is he the guy or is it likely? It's crazy to say, but I think he's probably cuttable in redraft. Definitely not in Dynasty just because, but man, he has fallen hard and fast. I'll be honest, I don't think I'm willing to buy low, but I also don't know if I'm willing to sell low. The upside kind of exists, and I mean, if I can get a second, sure, but
Yeah, it really depends on the price for sure. I mean, would so you would sell him for a second?
I would consider it. I would consider buying it for a second, but if I get more than that, I would definitely sell them. If I have to pay more, I don't think I could. I don't even know if I could pay a second. I
If somebody offered you a second and a third, would you take that?
think I'd probably have to, depending on the premium. If it's a 2-0 premium, maybe I'm keeping Andrews, but no premium. Yeah, you bet your ass I would.
What about Evan Ingram? You taking Evan Ingram over Andrews?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
especially if he's healthy. I mean, if I'm looking for someone to score me points, I want to make sure they're going to be scoring me points.
I mean, the nice thing is, even if he's not healthy, they're still scoring the same amount of points.
Bad but true.
Yeah, catching the same amount of balls, that's for sure.
Yeah, just real sad state of affairs for Mark Andrews. And this is a safe space, guys. You can cry with us. I think, I know at least Justin, I don't know about JP, but we've definitely got some ties to Andrews here. So
None at all.
I'm
good for you.
fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, I've got my fair share too. So you can join in our misery with me and Justin.
My favorite is I have a Pitts Manders tight end room. It's like,
So
come on.
Thought it was going to be pretty darn good going into the year. Now you might not have any. So let's move on to another sad subject here. JP, who's your first stock down?
Yeah, the player I want to talk about here is Tyreek Hill. And I mean, before the Monday night game, he was wide receiver 30 in points per game. And that is definitely going to be coming down because he just had 6 points PPR on Monday night. It's just rough because we know that it's because two is out. We know Tyreek Hill's great, but they don't have a competent backup there right now. So it's really, really hard to even think that you're going to, be getting boom weeks from him at this point. I mean, you still got to start him probably, but Tyreek, he's not helping teams that are contending much right now. He turns 31 at the end of the season, so I don't think there's a lot of rebuilders that are trying to buy him either. Depends on the price, I guess. But I only really feel confident projecting Tyreek Hill for one more elite year, and that's next year in 2025, because after that, he'll be 32. And the age cliff, it's kind of hard to project. He might still be good, but at that point, I just don't know if I'm going to bet on him to be elite. So it just really stinks to see that right now. It's all about Tua, and there's so much uncertainty about that. It's like if Tua plays this year, he might be a playoff hammer for you, right? If you feel confident in that, maybe you could buy him, but his price is definitely down a lot from the start of the season.
Yeah, I want to pour some out for my Tyreek because I acquired a few shares this offseason. I was paying about a first and a second for Tyreek. Let's just start off the line at a random first, JP. Are you paying that for Tyreek if you're competing and you're looking at him as a down the playoff run asset?
I might because I do. It's so hard to just take that shot in the dark with Tua, but from the sounds of it, I think that Tua is pushing to play and wants to come back. I do think I would be willing to pay a playoff first, but if it's an early first, no.
If you have to add a second to a guaranteed playoff first, are you doing that?
I might look elsewhere. I don't think so.
That's sad state of affairs, but I can't say that I disagree. It's sad to see.
Certainly so. And Justin, who is your second stock down player?
My second stock down player, not a very generational talent, although he was supposed to be. Trevor Lawrence, man. Like at this point, he just signed a mega contract, so he certainly has some job security. I will say that. The bluff of benching him for Mac Jones, spoilers, they're not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. I mean, he's not good. Like, I don't even have this guy. I don't know if he's a top 20 dynasty quarterback for me anymore. He's somewhere in between 18 to 22. I'm working through my rankings, but he's in the tier that's 18 to 22. So even if I have him at 18, there's not really a difference between him and QB 22. The only thing he's really got going for him is job security. I mean, I guess I lie to myself for the few shares that I have as I go to bed at night, telling myself he still does have upside. I whisper sweet nothings into my ears, my own ears. It's kind of weird. I have a funnel thing that I tell myself fantasy football lies with. It will help you guys sleep if you're listening to the podcast. It's kind of like a little self ASMR telling yourself that your duds on your fantasy team are going to do better. I don't know. This is a guy that I thought had some value, and now I view him pretty much the same as a Bo Nix type of guy as far as like dynasty value goes.
For me, at least, the hope is that they get a new offensive scheme in there and find someone that actually clicks with him. But boy, it sure has been quite a downfall for him. Let's start it here. Maybe I'll get a little more creative after, but just one playoff first.
I can't answer that because it just depends. There are definitely teams where I would take that for him, where I have him, and there's definitely teams where I would pay that for him. I think like it's really situationally dependent, but I'm certainly like not buying him for that in every situation. There's definitely situations I'd rather keep the flexibility of the first than have the mediocre quarterback. So I think in a vacuum, I probably prefer the flexibility of a first, but yeah.
That pretty much means that was a good line to set then if you're on both sides of it. Just kind of curious, JJ McCarthy or Trevor Lawrence, if you don't need a quarterback to start.
If Lawrence is my QB3 or if I'm tanking, give me McCarthy.
Well, these are QB2, and you have Gardner Minshew behind him.
Gardner Minshew, I'm keeping Lawrence. If I had Sam Darnold and Andy Dalton, I would take JJ McCarthy. Like if I had a couple old guys that I wasn't expecting to start like that, or Derek Carr and Andy Dalton, I think I would run that, and I would probably take that for Lawrence, to be honest, because I think the production is pretty much the same, but Minshew is trash. Hate to say it.
Yeah, it's hard to rely on him if he's going to be slotting into your lineup for any sort of contender. But David, go ahead and give us your second stock down player.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Carson Steele here. He is pretty much the definition of a spike week player. This time last week, you might have even been able to get a second for him in some leagues. Certainly could have got a safer handcuff. But unfortunately, he fumbled on the first drive after 2 carries this week, ended up with just those 2 carries. I think he did come back in for a little bit, but it was the Kareem Hunt show. He ended up with 14 carries. On top of that, CH expected back this week, and we're another week closer to Pacheco coming back. I'm not really sure that you can get anything of use for Steele right now. If you can, though, do it. I mean, any third. I don't even know if you can get that, though.
Yeah, I mean, he played an 18% snap share this week after playing 62% the week before. So, yeah, and just watching the game, he looked lost out in like running routes. Patrick Mahomes was pointing like, go that way. So, yeah, I just don't think that he's up to speed. And it looks like Kareem Hunt's taken over. So, would you offload him for 2/4?
Honestly, I think I probably would. I might even just take one if I don't. It would depend on the league settings. I mean, maybe really deep benches. I'm keeping him instead of the fourth, but man, I feel like he's probably already lost his shot at gaining value again.
Outside of the fourth, like I personally just try to flip him for any running back that I actually think has a chance of doing something that hasn't had any opportunity yet. So give me any type of backup running back that you think you can get Ty Chandler types, and I would be ecstatic.
Would you add 2/4 to take Steele to get Ty Chandler?
Yeah, for sure. Probably add a third because I think I'd pay a third for Chandler straight up, and that's kind of what I view this as.
Really cool name though, so good for him on that. And so that kind of ties up our stock up, stock down section for the week. Please let us know in the comments below how you like this. Feel free to suggest any other formats you think you guys might like as well. We're just experimenting. This is our first regular season of football where we're doing the podcast, so we're trying to figure it out, hash it out. We want to provide context that is useful to you, as well as just good for us to go through, so basically we're just trying to figure out like, hey, this is something that we think is like important for us in our process, so hopefully it is for yours as well. If you think there's something more useful for yours, please again let us know. We will absolutely look at shifting things around throughout the season. So thank you for all of us here at the Dino Construction Podcast for joining us again. We hope again you found this as useful for you as it was for us. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen or view. And from all of us here at the Dino Construction Podcast, until next time.